Welcome to Cryptocurrencies, the Future of Digital Money Show and Wealth Research Group. And with us, Tim Draper. We welcome you back. Sir, thank you much for being here. His prominent investments, if you don't know, include Baidu, Hotmail, Skype, Tesla, SpaceX, AngelList, Solar City, Ring, Twitter, DocuSign, Coinbase, Robinhood. Man, Twitter, this thing goes on and on. He very famous for his $250,000 prediction on Bitcoin. And also for his part in the purchase of U.S. Marshal Service auction of seized bitcoins from the Silk Road marketplace. This is a treat for everyone who's listening, and I hope you get a lot of value and content from this. This is a person who's walked the talk in all walks of life, especially business and entrepreneurship. Tim, thank you for jumping on the call.
Terrific. Well, thanks for having me, Lior. And yeah, there have been. It's really fun if you live long enough. You and you're an investor. You do end up with a whole string of successes, and it's been really an amazing life and career that I've been able to have. And being an investor who's willing to go around the world and not just be stuck in the Silicon Valley, I think that's made a big impact on me too. So yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me on the show.
Sir, I want to ask you you've been around, like you say, you go places, in China, they don't even use paper money anymore. They don't even use credit cards anymore. Could you give us like a bird's eye view of the digital currency economy, the cashless society progress? Where is this world going in 5 years? How do you see people paying in North America in 5 years and around the world? Do you see companies that are established like a Visa type or something like that they're going to get really disrupted and are going to be like the blockbuster Netflix type era?
Yeah, Bitcoin has really opened up the world. It's allowed us to have a frictionless, open, transparent, and global currency, a currency that everyone can use and everybody, and it's not tied to any political force. It's not political currency. It's not fiat currency or government currency. It is currency that we can all recognize. And the Bitcoin blockchain has never been hacked. So, it's safer than anything you've got in the bank. The banks are getting hacked all the time. And the other thing it does is the banks currently charge 2.5% to 4% every time you swipe your credit card. You wouldn't have that. It would be frictionless with Bitcoin. And so yes, there are a lot of countries that are using Bitcoin as a currency. Japan was really the first to say Bitcoin was a national currency, and then it started to spread, and a lot of people around the world are realizing, hey, this is a better way to do business. It keeps a perfect record. It's transparent. Everybody knows where the money went. And you mentioned China. China is one of the governments that said, Bitcoin's illegal, and then they went, oh, well, but we're going to do our own. I think the old China under Deng Xiaoping, the open and free China, would have embraced Bitcoin as a new way of looking at currency. But the current government is sort of a control-based government, and I think they're making a big mistake. But it is true that the government there is applying all these new technologies. Yes, of course, cryptocurrency is much easier. It's much better. You just touch your phone to something, and you can send money. It moves much faster. It'll increase the circulation of capital, and when you increase the circulation of capital, everyone around you becomes wealthier. The friction items of banking and government printing of money, all of those things are slowing down our currency. We now can have a currency that's not tethered to any of that. And this is a really exciting time. Now, some governments are going to be open to it and say, hey, this is a great thing for my people. Everyone's going to be wealthier because of it. And some governments are going to be threatened by it or feel threatened by it. And I think the governments that are open to it are going to be the big winners over the next 40 years. I think you've got another use of Bitcoin. Let's say you're a Syrian refugee and you have a bunch of Syrian money. Well, you take that to Greece and you're sitting on the refugee island and you can't use any of the money that you have. It's not worth anything in Greece. And but if you had Bitcoin, you could just draw down your Bitcoin, buy a house, get your life started again, and you'd be off to the races.
Yeah, it's like in my heritage, at least, it's like almost like diamonds when you move from country to country. The easiest way, the smallest way, the most compatible way was to move with diamonds. I want to ask you, Tim, you're in Silicon Valley. You talk with young people all the time. You talk with young adults. Let's say you're now 25 to 45, and you want to switch careers. You want to get into this trend. You want to get into this industry, the fintech, the digital society, the digital economy. As a career or as an entrepreneur, what would you do right now? You have no connections. You have your ambition, your willingness to work double as much as anybody else. What would you be doing right now? Where are the opportunities in terms of like skills, career, and what are people looking for? Where's the value?
Well, I think the first thing I'd do is probably, it would depend on my circumstance, but I'd probably take a job at a place like Coinbase or Ledger or one of the top crypto companies, and so that I could understand how it was all going. And then, of course, I'm very entrepreneurial. I would look to see what's missing, and then maybe start a business around that. And I'd also think about, well, what's next? Here's what I'm seeing is next. Bitcoin has opened up the world, and governments are either becoming more open, realizing that people can travel and they want to attract people to their country, or they're closing up and they're trying to keep people in like by force. And what's really going on is that Bitcoin is global, and we've always been tribal. We've always had our tribe and our borders, and don't cross this border or we'll go after you. It's the sort of leave us alone thing. It kept us safe. The borders kept us safe. Well, all of a sudden now the world is completely opened up, and Bitcoin's the first, but there are many other interesting places that this decentralized world can take you. New technologies in decentralization are going to affect all the biggest industries in the world. We have a company called Unstoppable Domains. You can buy a domain that cannot be shut down. So you could buy a domain in China that says free Tibet, and the Chinese couldn't shut it down, or one in anyway, you could say whatever you need to say, and in effect it's the decentralization of free speech. You as a person of the press would probably like that.
That's pretty amazing.
No, I do. I also look and I see industries like the ones that were affected by the internet are media, communications, information, gaming, entertainment, a lot of interesting industries that really got changed when the internet came along. Well, when Bitcoin and blockchain, smart contracts, and artificial intelligence come along, we're going to be in a place where we're all the biggest industries in the world are about to go through a huge transformation. And those are banking and finance and government and insurance and healthcare and real estate. Biggest industries in the world are about to go through transformation. This is potentially the biggest sea change the world has ever had, ever imagined. And that plays well for an entrepreneur who wants to jump in and try something. And it also plays well for a venture capitalist. We always benefit when there's a lot of turmoil in the world. The entrepreneurs create new ways of doing things, and we fund them.
You know, there's a funny duality, a paradox with all currencies basically, but for example, with Bitcoin, the asset itself is Bitcoin, but in order to realize the gain on it, you have to sell it. So in other words, if you're buying Bitcoin, the price goes up, you're holding this valuable asset that you believe in. In order to actually realize the gain, you have to use it or to sell it to somebody else. How do you look at Bitcoin? Is it an investment? What is the best way to capitalize on what's happening, to monetize what's happening? Because obviously, if you're buying Bitcoin and you're a net buyer, you'll never make money on Bitcoin. If you're a net seller, you're selling the asset that you like. It's the paradox that all mine companies have. They basically mine the asset and then they sell it. They're left with the Caterpillar trucks. So
well, I think for the next 4 or 5 years, it's going to be a good place to just move your capital. I look at Bitcoin as currently as sort of an investment, but longer term and more recently as just a currency. I mean, we accept Bitcoin here for rent. We accept Bitcoin for tuition at Draper University. We look at Bitcoin as an appreciating asset, and we would rather have that than a depreciating asset like dollar, yen, euro, renminbi. So we look at it that way. We think that at some point, Bitcoin is a major force in the amongst the currencies of the world. Right now, it's the equivalent of gold or diamonds because it's a really good stored value. It's also a great way to send money cross-border to workers in other countries, to move money where they're unbanked. I mean, there are lots of interesting, good applications for it. But longer term, there are companies like OpenNode that are allowing people to use Bitcoin in retail scenario and make it very easy for the retailers. And the retailers are going to love it, and the e-tailers, because they don't have to pay 2.5% to 4% to the banks every time you swipe your credit card. So this is going to be a big savings for them, and they're going to encourage people to use Bitcoin to buy things. And the reason I'm saying it might be an investment vehicle for the next couple of years is that I made the prediction that it would go to 250,000 by 2022 or maybe first quarter 2023. And that is based on a number of factors, but it's important that that you see that at some point it becomes, that would be 5% of the global currency. That ends up being a very small amount of the global currency, but I think it will be because it's going to be so much easier to use, and the proliferation is such that it's going to just continue to grow in value. And so I'm thinking that that's a good place to, I'd much rather hold that than any other currency. And I look at it very much as a currency. And I think long term, it will be a currency. As it appreciates in value against all the government currencies, I think the governments are going to want to tax it as an asset. But longer term, I think it will be much more stable, but it might be, $1 million per Bitcoin. But I think at that point it becomes more of a stable currency, and one that's pretty much aligned with the other currencies of the world. So it will be less used as an investment and more used as a currency. And there are lots of other alternative currencies, and there are other people doing things very interesting. Tezos is doing something very interesting. Won't take as much energy. A number of different currencies are doing different things to make it easier for us to use crypto. I think it's only probably 1 year or 2 years before we are all using some form of crypto, and people start laughing at you if you go to Starbucks and you try to pay with a credit card. It'd be like that old lady coming and pulling out her purse and pulling out pennies to pay for her coffee. I think we're definitely moving to a digital currency world, a cryptocurrency world, and a Bitcoin world, and I think we're all going to be better off as a result.
Tim, Factfulness, a book that Bill Gates has put as one of his top books to read, talks a lot about the fact that you hear something 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and you think it's the same way today just because you haven't continued to research a topic. There's just a stigma that some things have. And in the book, they talk about the fact that Africa is about to have a surge in population that is much bigger than China and India and all. How important will the Bitcoin and everything else that has to do with digital currencies, because banks are not in Africa for the most part, and cell phones aren't, and smartphones aren't. Can we talk about Africa and its potential short-term and long-term? If there is even a potential short-term, what would you be doing if you're really adventurous, if you're really someone that is an entrepreneur that wants to go into frontier markets? What are some of the opportunities that are going on in that regard?
Well, in Africa, yeah, it's true. Nigeria already has 100 million people, and they're going to have 1 billion people by 2050, I believe. And all of Africa will be 4 billion by 2050. And right now, all of Africa is about 1 billion. And so, yes, there's going to be enormous growth. And the benefit Africa has is similar to the benefit China had about 50, 60 years ago. They can leapfrog existing infrastructure. Right now, nobody trusts the banks in a lot of places in Africa, and a lot of people are unbanked in Africa. And the currencies, I know the Nigerian naira drops about 50% a year, so they'd much rather hold on to Bitcoin. And our company BitPesa in Africa it's actually now global. It's going to Indonesia and a whole bunch of other places. It has the ability to move money from one currency to another through Bitcoin, and it seems to be taking off, and people are now starting to just trade Bitcoin with their smartphones, and I think that is a great opportunity for Africa, because they can leapfrog our banking system. They don't have to be stuck with the 2.5% to 4% every time you swipe a credit card. So this is a really interesting time for Africa, and I think Africa uniquely, because Indonesia does have pretty strong banking, but there's still many unbanked in India, Indonesia, many places around the world where Bitcoin can be a great solution for them.
Tim, there are thousands of altcoins. What is an altcoin in your mind as an entrepreneur, as an investor? And do you consider them like little startups, basically, but with their asset being on the blockchain and their shares being tokens. How do you view altcoins? Do you even bother with them? What is this industry basically Bitcoin and thousands uh, of very high failure projects?
You know, I do love the altcoins. I like all the tokens. I like the whole crypto world and community because I like competition. I like that people have to compete and make sure that their currency is better for one thing or another. And a lot of creativity went into all those altcoins. A lot of that creativity it gets pulled into Bitcoin over time. But just the way a bunch of software companies were created and Microsoft sort of absorbed um, all those software packages and started to do it themselves. Um, on the other hand, yeah, there are a couple of cryptocurrencies that are doing kind of interesting things. There are some that are stable coins that are tied to the dollar or the euro or a package of coins. There is Tezos, as I mentioned, that uses proof of stake instead of proof of work, and that requires less energy to run a similar blockchain. Um, there are 3,000 tokens out there. Some of them have been abandoned and people don't even know it. And some of them have real entrepreneurs working really hard to make them important. And those are the ones that we like to support. And so some are tied to new forms of government. Some are tied to getting smart contracts and how to improve contract work. There are a lot of interesting opportunities that have come up because of crypto. And when you take all those crypto technologies and you apply them and put them together with artificial intelligence, you get something that could be the future of insurance, the future of government, the future of real estate. All of these really interesting new technologies can happen because of
Tim, what are Bitcoin's biggest problems right now? The biggest challenges?
that. It's interesting. Women are 86% of the purchasing population, and they are only 1 out of every 15 Bitcoin wallets is a woman. So I think once the women recognize that this is a better way, saves them 2.5% to 4% every time they shop. I think that once the women recognize the value here, they are going to come in mass. And I think that's probably one of the things that will be a major breakthrough. Otherwise, I think they've solved a lot of the early problems. The early problems were how much energy it uses. And so you could only do a small number of transactions per second. But now with OpenNode, I think the number is that you can, where Visa is something like 5 million transactions a second, I think OpenNode is something like 15 million transactions a second. So I think you can, we've got people who have solved some of the biggest hurdles. And the other is just adoption. It's coming. That's just a matter of people starting to recognize that, hey, this is money. I can move it around.
Tim, where can people check out more of your current, speaking engagement, what you're up to? Do you have a Twitter following? And what are some of the projects and services that people can look into with your brands?
Yeah, I'm at timdraper.com. Oh, sorry, I'm at Tim Draper on Twitter, and I'm at Timothy Draper on LinkedIn, and Tim Draper on Facebook. And then the things that I'm working on are I built the school. I built Draper University of Heroes, and great entrepreneurs entrepreneurs that are in their 20s that really want a big break should go see if they can get in. It's getting harder and harder to get in, but the ones we take actually end up getting amazing launches. And we've had like 1,200 students. They've started 400 companies, and they've come from 82 different countries. We've had some amazing success with them, and anyway, very exciting place. And then my venture fund, Draper Associates, is constantly looking for new technologies, new opportunities to invest in, and we're open to the crazy ones. We're happy to take a look at anything.
Tim, thank you very much for coming on the show. It was a real pleasure.
And read my book.
Go ahead.
How to be the startup hero. You can get it on Amazon.
Okay, 100%. We'll have that link actually in the description box below. Tim, thank you again for coming on.
Thanks, Lior. And sorry, I was a little jet lagged, but I think it came off all right.
Thank you, sir.